All right, I'm going to continue from the previous video for this B2000 class. I want to talk about how you can use RStudio a little bit better. Now, one of the first questions is, how do I share my output and results? Whether you want to share with somebody in your study group, or you want to share with the instructor to see a homework assignment, or you want to share your research within the discipline. I'm going to give you a bunch of possibilities and remind it's okay if you don't start off great from day one. You just want to be steadily improving. Now, one of the easiest ways to share is to just take a screenshot of your output. The really ugly Clues version is to use your phone to take a picture of your screen. It's not optimal, but on the other hand, we've all done that. There are times when, for various reasons, that may just be where you're at. On the other hand, you want to start giving yourself better options. So the next step up the ladder is to have a file where you copy and paste the output, maybe comment on the output. That's pretty ugly, but we can do better. Next step up, maybe create a file called RMD, which are Markdown file. It creates a computer code that has the text of your output and the code that runs it all joined together. Within this Markdown, you can tell it exactly what output is to be created. Now, an advantage of an integrated Markdown file is when I want to write up my results, if I had a separate word processing file, then I would type, for instance, the average value was, and then go over into the data analysis program, execute some commands, and then copy paste into Google Docs or whatever word processing file. I mean, it's fine to do that occasionally, but it's not efficient, and it is prone to error. Sometimes your finger slips with copy paste and you drop a digit. Or maybe you make a change later on, maybe even the most minor change, but then you got to go back and update all those, and you have to remember all those. And what if you miss one? It's just inviting errors. The Markdown file allows you to have a single program that creates a document. So you tippity-tap, the average value was, and then there's some code that says, okay, R, now calculate the average value and insert it right here. You can do tables and charts in the same way. That's very useful capability. From File, New File, choose R Markdown. I've shown that up top. Creates a Markdown file. Example below. As many things in the class, you might say, yeesh, I can just barely, I'm just hanging on by my fingertips. I cannot bear to learn one goddamn thing more. In which case, fine, you do not have to learn this one goddamn thing more right now. On the other hand, if you're like, hey, maybe I'm getting this, maybe at some point down the line you feel that way, then you learn it. One of the goals of this class is convince a bunch of you that this could be a good career. If you find that you'll enjoy learning new stuff, then it is a really good career option. It pays a ton of money. I'm very proud of all the students that go on with a lot less work experience than me and make a lot more money than I do. I'm teaching here in the public schools, but private sector pays quite well. Now, maybe at some point down the line, you'll want to come back and learn this all better. So, just put a pin somewhere in your brain. A metaphorical pin, not a real pin. Do not actually put a pin in your brain. Do not be literal here. Come on, people, work with me. Anyway, so your output, you can tell it what kind of a file, MD file, Markdown file. GitHub knows exactly how to display that. I put a lot of the documents for this course that way. You can output other types of files, such as a web page, HTML, PDF, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint type slides, ton of different options. There's a link to the R Markdown cheat sheet that gives some popular choices. You can create the RMD file in RStudio and then you knit it together. You see I put a red circle around the knit command that you would find there. The whole point here is you want to get to be a better storyteller. Analytics is not just about doing the complicated technical stuff. Especially AI makes it easier and easier to do some complicated technical stuff. The point is explaining why that technical stuff is important and explaining what it means. You know, a lot of businesses, they talk about, I want actionable insight. What does it mean? What do I do with these findings? So you really got to communicate your findings. Do not just vomit out the raw output. Now, early in the class, I understand that's just, you know, you got to show you can do it, but you're going to want to have good tables, nice charts, great output to explain what's going on. Partly that's to help ourselves understand it, you know, but the bottom line is we humans are narrative thinkers. That's how we do all this stuff. Now, one of the virtues of the Markdown file is, it integrates the text of the narrative and the calculations. You look at the bottom of the file, there's code that says pretty num, which calculates the numbers and tells R how to write it out pretty. That way, if the data set changes, you know, maybe one of your teammates goes through and notices, oh crap, we had an extra line or something like that, something went wrong, blah, 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 or I found a few more observations, whatever, then it just automatically updates. You're not copy pasting from R to Google Docs or whatever. Now, if you're doing this as a job for your career, you might have regular reports that get run, in which case you just automated it all. Last month we had blank sales, and just tell R, count it up, dude, and it puts that in the document. It makes it a lot easier for you. Again, I understand this is a little complicated at the beginning, but it's a goal you can aspire to as the semester goes on. By the end of the class, you got to write a pretty substantial report, so you want to get to that aspect. Now, you can make your code fancy for varying levels of fancy. At the beginning, it may be pretty simple, but again, get better as you go along. I'm going to show you some of the steps. You can see what's going on behind the scenes. You can read the knitted output, but then look at also the Markdown file that created that output. You can go and see all the steps. Plain Markdown file readable by GitHub is meant to be very plain. No fancy fonts or colors or whiz-bang stuff. It's just text. Very simple. If you want to create fancy, lovely output, then there are ways. There are even people who are out there creating artwork with R. That cheat sheet has some of the basic stuff like headers and bold and underline and, you know, that kind of good stuff. But now, another component of RStudio is the ability to create projects. A project is a really useful way to keep all your code together in its own folder. I know the typical method that we all tend to use is just be like a pack rat, shove all the files into Google Drive or whatever, and then, you know, you just be a hoarder. Now, if you want to be a hoarder, if that's really how you want to live your life, then that's on you. But I'm going to exhort you to try to do better. Better ways, create each project in a separate folder with all the files there. Then you can port it around. You can share it with other people. You know, every time you start the session, you double-click the R project file. Everything puts together. You know, I've showed an example of how that works. Now, your operating system might hide the file extension. You might have to squint to discover what exactly is the icon, which one is which, or you just give it a good name. But you double-click on that file to bring up RStudio, and everything is in the right place right from the beginning. Because one of the things when we're doing data is sharing is caring, right? We're going to be sharing our projects because we want to have projects that are replicable. That's a fundamental principle of how science is done. Somebody else should be able to take your file, run the same commands, and get the same output. That idea of replicability is a fundamental aspect of doing science right. One of the key parts of any scientific enterprise is somebody can take the same data and get the same answer. It's one way of demonstrating that our conclusions are valid. So you can provide replicable commands that somebody else would indeed get the same answers doing the same things. Now, it's also relevant because we'll be working in groups and you want to keep your team all together. If I do it and another team member does it, then damn, we better come up with the same output. Most jobs in the world involve teamwork, so this is a useful career skill. Another reason I'm encouraging you to figure out GitHub, because that's a useful way to demonstrate your skills to somebody like a prospective employer. If all the files needed to do a particular analysis are all sitting on the same folder, it's easy to share that folder. Don't be a hoarder with a huge random collection of junk. particularly, you might want to come back to some of this code at a later date. Maybe even just a week later, depending on how much fun you had over the weekend, you might not remember everything you did previously. Be nice to yourself, to your future self. Your future self will be grateful to you, current self, for the time you're putting in now to get a little more organized and get your shit together.